Bear Brook murders. This was a real murder case. Who was the killer? In 1985, a rusted barrel was discovered in Bear Brook State Park, New Hampshire. Inside were the remains of two unidentified victims. This case remained unsolved for decades until modern forensic science finally revealed the truth. Today, we'll examine the investigation process of the Bear Brook serial murders. November 1985, deep in the forests of Bear Brook State Park, New Hampshire. A hunter was tracking through the dense woodland when he stumbled upon something that shouldn't have been there. A rusted metal barrel, abandoned among the trees. At first, he thought it was just garbage, something dumped by careless campers. But there was an unusual smell coming from it, something that made him uneasy. When police arrived and opened that barrel, everything changed. Inside were the decomposed remains of what appeared to be an adult woman and a young child. The bodies were in such an advanced state of decay that identification seemed impossible. No wallets, no identification, barely any clothing remained. The victims had been reduced to bones and remnants. Investigators combed through the scene meticulously, but there were virtually no clues to indicate who these people were or who had put them there. Bear Brook State Park was remote, miles from any major road or residential area. It was clear the killer had chosen this location deliberately, knowing it might be years before anyone found these remains, if ever. Fast forward 15 years to May 2000. The same remote area of Bear Brook State Park yielded another horrific secret. Just a few meters from where the first barrel had been discovered, authorities found a second metal drum. The discovery sent chills through the investigation team. Once again, the barrel contained human remains. This time, two more young children. Now there were 4 victims total, 1 adult woman and 3 children, all found in identical circumstances, in the same isolated location, disposed of in the same methodical way. The fact that the killer had returned to this exact spot after a decade and a half was deeply disturbing to investigators. This wasn't random dumping, this was a calculated choice. The killer had used this remote forest location as his own personal graveyard, returning when convenient to dispose of more victims. But still, despite having 4 sets of remains, authorities had no idea who these people were or who had killed them. The New Hampshire State Police threw everything they had at this case. The investigation consumed countless hours and resources, but every lead seemed to hit a dead end. They started with the barrels themselves. Both were identical models used by electrical companies in the 1970s and 1980s. However, thousands of these exact barrels had been distributed throughout New England, making them virtually untraceable. Forensic experts examined the remains extensively. Dental analysis revealed that all victims had lived in the northeastern United States, likely consuming fluoridated water common to New England in the 1970s and 1980s. The isotope analysis of their bones suggested they had spent their final years in New Hampshire or nearby states. Investigators cross-referenced every missing persons report they could find from the relevant time periods. They interviewed local residents, contacted dental offices, reached out to schools that might have records of missing children. They even brought in psychics and mediums, desperate for any lead that might crack the case. But DNA technology was still in its infancy, and without clear dental records or other identifying features, the case gradually went cold. For nearly 2 decades, the 4 victims remained anonymous, known only as the Bear Brook victims or the Barrel children. By the late 2000s and early 2010s, forensic DNA analysis had evolved dramatically. A revolutionary technique called genealogy emerged. The ability to trace family relationships through publicly available genetic databases. This technology had already begun solving decades-old cold cases across the country. In 2017, investigators decided to apply this cutting-edge technique to the Bear Brook case. The results would shock everyone involved in the investigation. First, the analysis revealed that 3 of the 4 victims were biologically related. The adult woman was the mother of 2 of the children. This suggested they were likely a family unit, possibly killed together. But the 4th child, one of the little girls, showed no genetic relationship to the other 3 victims. Then came the most devastating revelation of all. Advanced DNA analysis revealed something that no one had anticipated. This 4th child, This innocent little girl who had been murdered and stuffed into a barrel was the biological daughter of the killer himself. The monster who had committed these crimes had killed his own child and disposed of her body alongside his other victims. The psychological profile of someone capable of such an act was beyond what even experienced investigators had encountered before. Unmasking the Chameleon killer. With the killer's DNA profile now established, investigators ran it through criminal databases nationwide. Finally, they got a match. The perpetrator was a man named Terry Rasmussen, born in 1943, but that name was just one of many he had used throughout his criminal career. Rasmussen was what law enforcement calls a career criminal and a master of identity theft decades before it became a common crime. Over the course of 30 years, he had used at least 20 different aliases: Bob Evans, Gordon Jensen, Larry Vanner, and many others. He would assume a new identity, commit crimes, disappear, and resurface somewhere else with a completely different name and backstory. Police dubbed him the Chameleon Killer. As investigators dug deeper into Rasmussen's background, a pattern of violence and deception emerged. He had crisscrossed the country from the 1970s through the early 2000s, leaving a trail of victims in his wake: child sexual assault, fraud, identity theft, and multiple murders. He targeted vulnerable women and children, often insinuating himself into their lives before destroying them. The cruel irony was that Rasmussen had died in prison in 2010, 7 years before he would be connected to the Bear Brook murders. He had been serving time for the murder of Yoon Jun, a woman he had killed in California in 2002. Justice, in the traditional sense, was impossible. The killer had escaped earthly punishment for his most heinous crimes. The breakthrough in identifying Rasmussen led to another major development, finally putting names to some of the victims. Using genetic genealogy and extensive family tree research, investigators were able to identify the adult woman as Marlise Honeychurch and 2 of the children as her daughters, Marie Elizabeth Vaughn and Sarah Lynn McWaters. The family's story was heartbreaking. Marlise had been a young mother trying to make a better life for her children when she encountered Rasmussen, probably sometime in the late 1970s. Family members had reported them missing in 1978, but with Rasmussen's skill at manipulation and identity theft, the family seemed to have vanished without a trace. For over 40 years, Marlise's relatives had wondered what happened to her and the children. Some had held out hope they were alive somewhere, maybe starting fresh with new identities. Others feared the worst but had no way to confirm their suspicions. The DNA identification finally gave them answers, though not the ones they had hoped for. However, one victim still remains nameless. The 4th child, Rasmussen's own daughter, has never been identified. Investigators call her the Bear Brook girl, and her case remains open. She was approximately 2 to 4 years old when she died, likely born in the late 1970s or early 1980s. Given Rasmussen's nomadic lifestyle and use of multiple identities, finding her mother or other family members has proven nearly impossible. The Bear Brook case demonstrates how advances in forensic science can solve cold cases decades old. While not all questions were answered, science helped restore names to victims and bring truth to families.